everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the fourth talk. Okay, so just going to rename some of you. Okay, you've already renamed yourself. Welcome and thank you for rolling in. It's very, very helpful. Thank you for the wait. And I am going to spotlight. Oh, I don't need to. She's on screen right now with her screen share. So say hi to Vayangana, and thank you, Vayangana, so much. So Vayangana and I have not met, okay, but I have been someone, she asks questions, she's so curious. So it's actually a social media relationship that transpired into, hey, come on, do a conversation for us, okay? And the field that she's picked, but she and I met online also at a different training at one point, which was also related to this ABA. The reason I really wanted her to come on here is because she has a way of articulating that is really wonderful and, gives a lot of clarity to complex concepts, as well as she's so curious. She will make you think for sure. So, and I think that's a wonderful thing to have, especially when you're doing something in this area of work, okay? I want to also remind you all that applied behavior analysis, for all of you online, Vayanga, maybe you can correct me as well as we move on, has earned this rep of a kind of tool, therapy, understanding, technique that's for special needs only. Now you only use for special ed. It became so popularized with autism at one point. And then, so it's like, oh, my child has autism, my cousin has autism. Do you do ABA? You do ABA? Do you do ABA? And then it just got reduced into this small, teeny, tiny thing about, okay. But it is so much more. And all of you who are in this field of mental health right now will learn today how broad, beautiful, and incredible it is to actually have this in your skill set. Even if you don't do a master's like Vayangana has done, there are still other areas that she might be able to point you in to explore and get a better, accurate understanding. Okay, so this is one of our first talks that we're having, Vayangana. Thank you so much. In which there's also going to be a lot of myth busting happening about ABA, like a concept. The other talks that we've had is already existing things where we're just elaborating on things, but this today is one of those things, and I'm really excited about it. Very, very excited, and I hope everybody else is as much. Okay, over to you.
Okay, so I am Vayangana, and I'll be talking about the journey to ABA. The way I want this to go is kind of very informal in the way that this is not school. You can always interrupt and ask questions. Just unmute yourself and ask a question. There are no dumb questions. I am someone who's personally very bad at asking questions. So I know how difficult it is to ask questions, but I would love to ask questions, because when you ask questions is when I know if what the material I was speaking to made sense to you, right? Or like I can make it clearer for you. The other thing is, if you have a question in Sinhala, please feel free to ask that in Sinhala. I will try my best to explain it very well in Sinhala. In Tamil, I definitely wouldn't be able to explain it or understand it, but I'm pretty sure there's someone here who would be able to explain the thing in Tamil to me, and I could do a better job at explaining it to you. So I don't want this to be like school. Please unmute yourself. You don't even have to raise your hand. Just be like, hey, I have a question, right? Just feel free to interrupt. This is not school, right? That's kind of how I want this to go. Yeah, and thank you so much for like turning up to this like this late. I know it's like 8:30, so I'll make sure it's worthwhile your time. And I will also be asking questions in the middle, so I would like a little bit of engagement from you guys too. So as Rushma said, I am Vayangana. How I got roped into this is I didn't think this is what Rushma wanted me to do. I thought she just wanted to know how I got into the field. And then I was like, oh, she wants me to talk to people. So yeah, so I'm a bit of an introvert usually. So this is new to me too. So this is going to be fun for all of us. So I'm going to get into the agenda. So next slide. So my agenda for today is I'm going to talk about my journey into ABA, a little bit about applied behavior analysis, just a very, very brief idea about what ABA is because of time constraints. And I'll talk a little bit about grad school, what it is like after grad school. And then I have a questionnaire for you guys, a feedback questionnaire. So my journey into ABA began kind of with getting into the field of psychology. I wanted to get into the field of psychology for as long as I can remember. I'm very bad at spelling, so the way I say it is, even before I could spell psychology properly was when I wanted to get into psychology. So I did my BS in psychology and I did my BA in philosophy at the University of Arizona. I graduated in 2017. And then I went back to Arizona State University, ASU, for my applied behavior analysis master's. And so during this like short career span of mine, I have research experience. So my research experience has been in mostly not ABA related, but psychology, clinical psychology related. So one of the labs that I worked in was called the Body Project at the time. And we worked with it was a lab that focused on preventing eating disorders or body dysmorphia. So we ran these 2-hour sessions. We kind of focused on cognitive dissonance to help people understand like how we sometimes have these ideals of beauty and all of that, but they don't really make sense if you think about it. And then we also did activities to make sure to hone on that and for people to kind of understand, oh yeah, that does not make sense. And then another project that I was in, another research lab that I was in, this is also when I was in my undergrad, was the New Mothers Lab. So this was a very small part of a very larger project. So I was just in their behavioral coding team. I was solely coding interactions that infants were having with their moms, watching a 10-minute video where they interact with their moms. And I coded on how the infant self-comforts and then how they engage with the parent and kind of the infant's affect when they're engaging with the mom. And then when I moved back to Sri Lanka, I also worked got the opportunity to work in research at the University of Colombo. And when I was a part of that project, we were at the time kind of taking data from focus groups that were run and kind of adding those data from like in the Sri Lankan context, what people considered to be wisdom and like strengths of wisdom, and kind of adding it into an existing wisdom scale and kind of trying to validate that scale and then running that and having participants run those things and run that questionnaire and kind of understanding how wisdom works in Sri Lanka. Because a lot of the research that happens when it comes to like the big 5 wisdom, all of that happens in the West. And a lot of the problems in research is that even the ones that happen in the West, they all happen with college students. They all happen mostly with Caucasians, college degree educated, and mostly like a middle class background. So the data is kind of skewed. So it's very interesting to see like, oh, what does it look like in Southeast Asia? Because interestingly, this project was also looking at wisdom in Sri Lanka and also in the Philippines and kind of seeing what the similarities or differences were. Does anybody have any questions? I'm assuming with the silence that it is a no. So my work experience is what got me into ABA. I knew about ABA during my undergrad. I had one of my professors who was like, maybe this is something you want to look into, because ASU was just starting that program like in 2016 and I graduated in 2017. And I was like, no, like that is not how people learn. Like behaviorism, I was a big no for that. I was like, no, that's not how it happens. Like we are not on this like reinforcement schedule and all of that. Like, no, that is not how people learn. Then cut to a few years of working in the special needs sector in Sri Lanka. There were times when I didn't know how to help the clients that I had. And I didn't want to work with them because I felt like there's like my skill set is not enough to help this kid. I don't know what to do with this. Like, I also at times didn't feel supported by my superior. Because I'd go like I don't think I know what to do because this behavior is not changing and all of that. But then there was like, oh no, like do this and do that, and I knew that it wasn't working, and I kind of felt burnt out, not by the kids, but just by like not being able to help better. So that's when I again started to move into like looking at what's out there, and then lo and behold, ABA pops up for like kids with autism, kids with special needs. Started listening to a bunch of podcasts. I always had in the back of my mind that ASU had this program. My professor introduced me to it. So that is how I got into ABA. And then I worked as a behavior therapist when I was here, because as part of our program, we have a practicum. So then we work as behavior therapists for like various companies. So far, does anybody have any questions? Okay, no. Before we get into ABA, I would really like to know if y'all have some understanding about applied behavior analysis, or like about, if you don't have any, just unmute yourself and just say, no, I don't. Or I would like to at least hear one or two people. Or if you do have what it is, great. Thank you, Nafla, for putting that in the chat. I think I pronounced your name right. And or like, do you kind of know some things about behaviorism? Like, are you all like, I'm assuming all of you are from some kind of psych background. So did you have like some sort of behaviorism in, okay, so looks like there's a few newbies. Okay, so I'm gonna go with my slides as planned, because if you had some understanding, then I was kind of gonna skip some slides.
Just a quick thing, Vayangana. Those of you
Yes.
who might feel a little bit conscious about putting it on the group or saying it out loud, you're free to send me a direct message, or Medini a direct message, or Hiranti, and we're not going to share names. We're just going to be like, oh, newbie. That's it. Got another newbie.
Yes, that would be great. That would be great.
Anytime,
yes.
send us private messages. That's fine. And you can even send it to Vayangana as well. Okay.
Okay, so I have people who are new, who have a vague understanding. Okay, so we're going to get into ABA now. Okay, so in very, very simple, technical and very simple terms, because it's ABA is a science of understanding behavior and using the principles of applied behavior analysis to make socially significant behavioral changes in an organism. Why do I say in an organism? Because every living thing emits behavior. You emit behavior, your puppy at home does, the animals in the zoo does. So every living organism emits behavior. So that's why it's socially significant behavior changes for any organism, right? So let's kind of break down like, what does understanding behavior mean, right? So understanding behavior means like you're trying to see when someone emits a behavior, you're trying to understand like, oh, what is this behavior trying to tell me? Or like, what is this person or organism trying to get from doing this behavior, or what are they trying to get out of doing this behavior, right? And then with things being socially significant, it does not mean that it's socially, when it's, the word socially significant could be a little tricky. Like you'd be like, oh, it needs to matter to society or something like that. No, it means socially significant to the individual, and in turn, like the stakeholders. The stakeholders are the parents, any other caregivers. In the Sri Lankan context, like extended family is a big part. So it could be grandparents, aunts, uncles. It could also be teachers. So it has to have a social, like a positive impact on the client and also the stakeholders. So it cannot be impactful for the parents, but not impactful for the client. Then it is not socially significant. It has to be impactful for the client. Why is that very important? Is ABA does have, like, even if you go out and read something, you'll find like at least like 15 articles that say, oh, ABA is traumatic. ABA does have like people who have received ABA services in the past have been like, it is traumatic because they did not listen to what the therapist did not listen to what I wanted when it was traumatic to me when they told me to stop. They had programs to run all the automatic behavior that I was happening. So if you've worked with kids with autism, you know that they have some like self-soothing behaviors. It would be like hand flapping. Some of them would be tearing little pieces of paper and just little things, right? But they quote unquote look odd on the outside, but there's nothing that it does to like impact their well-being. Like, so then those things are traumatic because those are self-soothing behaviors. So if you take what is soothing to someone and you just take that away from them, make them stop doing it, that is, while ABA does work and gets you to stop doing it, if you think about it, if you put yourself in that person's shoes, it is definitely very traumatic. So the field as a whole, it is moving to make sure that the services that they provide are aligned with compassionate care and always takes assent from the kiddos that they work with. A little bit about assent and consent. So consent is something that you have to be over the age of 18 to provide. So a lot of the times the kiddos that they work with cannot provide consent, but they can provide assent. So that is why, so how you know assent, how you get to know and get a feel of like, oh, what assent looks like is like when you're running a program, is your kid always crying? Are they like always trying to avoid you? Are you no longer like, are you as the therapist no longer positive reinforcement for the kid? So then you would have to take a step back and build rapport and then kind of tweak your intervention to make sure you can gain assent and kind of the buy-in from your client to run this program. So now I'm gonna get into applied. I did kind of cover it before. So applied means socially significant positive behavior changes to the organism. So socially significant behavior changes can be social, language, daily living skills, self-care, what to do with their leisure time. How to, for little kids, it could be like how to like play with your toys. Because sometimes the kids are like throwing the toys everywhere. They're not functionally playing with the toy. They're not using the toy as intended to. So then just teaching different ways in which they can use the toy. How to interact with your peers. Those are things that are like fun. So even if you think, so now I've like talked a lot about like what it looks like for like kids with autism. That is a kind of a thing that happens with me because that is what I've worked with too. But if you think about socially significant behaviors, like even for a company, what is socially significant for them? So for them, socially significant could be like improving job satisfaction in your employees, or it could be just making sure less people are getting hurt on like a work line. Like that is socially significant. You don't want your employees to always get hurt. your employees to not wear their protective gear properly, because that means you're going to have a lot of insurance claims and all of that, right? So those are not just for like the individual, but in like a company setting, an organization setting. So those are kind of positive changes that you have to think about. And then next, behavior. So behavior is something that you can see and observe. It has to be measurable and you have to be able to observe it, right? So things like, so for example, if you are a parent and you want to see if your kid is studying, right? Oh, like your kid is sitting at the table looking at the book and staring, right? The kid's probably like, oh, I am studying. I am studying. Like, I'm just looking here. So you would see the kid and you're like, okay, he's sitting at the table and studying. But what does studying mean? So you would have to like operationally define studying. You could define it in different ways. That's why it's very important when it comes to ABA to like define the behavior that you're looking at. So I could define studying as, okay, you're studying, but you're also making like some sort of short notes. So there I can see observable change, an observable thing, like there is this product that comes out. So I can see, oh, okay, he's writing, right? I can see that. And then measurable, yes, I can see how many words were written, how much of the content was covered. So that is what I mean by like observable and measurable behavior. Because why is measurable important? It is because when it comes to analysis, you need data. So what sets ABA apart from like a lot of the other interventions that are out there for kids with autism is that it is highly data driven. Every program that you run, you are always taking data. You're taking data, you run a program, you're taking data, either did the behavior occur when you were running the program or did the behavior not occur? The frequency of the behavior, that is how many times did the behavior occur, or the duration of the behavior, how long was the behavior, right? So those are things. So because of that, you really need to be able, you cannot take data if your behavior is not observed, because you can't take data on something that you can't see or measure, right? And you need something that you can see or measure to be able to analyze the behavior. That's how you know, like, oh, is my intervention working or not? Or do I need to change my, and that's how you're going to know if you need to change your intervention or if you need to start adding something to your intervention or to see how it affects the behavior. So you need to be able to see how the environment is like what you're doing in the environment changes the behavior. So how does your intervention affect the behavior? So I'm just gonna go over like 2 examples. So say for example, like we're gonna just go over like what is the purpose of behavior. Like I think that is like very important to understand, like the function of behavior. If you are going to try to change a behavior, you can't just go and like, oh, I want you to do this, like let's do it. No, you need to understand the purpose of why that behavior is occurring, right? So you have a child, every time you bring the plate of, like you have all the malung, the minute the mother puts it all together and tries to feed the kid, she just cries, flips to the floor and like is like, no, I don't want it and all of that. And then the mother like takes the malung away, like it's like, okay, you don't have to eat the malung. Day 2, same thing. 3 days later, kid starts to do same thing, right? So here, what happens is the kid learns that every time Amma brings the malung, I cry, my mom takes the malung away, which means I don't have to eat the malung. So the kid is essentially learning that, great, like if I cry every time I get the malung, like I'm not gonna have to deal with this, right? So they get to avoid that unpleasant malung every time they cry, right? So there, the function or the purpose of that behavior is to escape the malung. Let's look at the next example. The next example is this new mom, and she's like, there's a baby, the baby is like crying, and the mom's like trying to figure out like, okay, why is the baby crying? Why is the baby crying? She sees the baby's teddy bear on the floor, and she's like, oh, okay, great. Like, let me give that to him. Oh, great. The baby stops crying, right? And every single time the teddy bear's on the floor, the baby just cries, right? However, so this means the baby's learning every time I cry, my mom comes, she gives me the teddy bear, great. So the baby gains access to something. The crying has a purpose. The crying is this mode that the baby uses to get access to what they want, right? So here, so the baby's, so which is great for the baby. Like, I cry, I get what I want. Amazing, right? So that way the baby's always gonna learn, like, if I cry, I get what I want. But here there's something like, this is not socially like significant, because crying is just not great for the baby, not great for the mom. So to make a socially significant change here would be like, you could teach the kid to like point, or like say teddy bear, so that the mom knows exactly what the kid wants and can give it to them, and the kid learns to functionally either point or ask. Like, so functional communication, like to communicate, not just communicate, to functionally communicate and get what they want. And just teaching that skill, it just then kind of like trickles down to like other avenues, right? So then they learn like, oh, this has worked for the teddy bear, so maybe I'll try, like, when I want the water bottle, when I want my like bottle, I can just point at it. When I want my mom to be like picked up, when I want me to be picked up by my mom, I could just say up instead of crying, which is so helpful for the mom, because the mom's not just trying to figure out what the kid wants. The kid also gets to tell exactly what they want and get it. So, and sometimes communication doesn't always look like vocal. It isn't vocal. It can be pointing. It can be just giving a card of a bottle and being like, here, this is, they just give the card and they're like, oh, and the mom's like, oh, they want the bottle, let me give that. I think that is like something that is misunderstood in Sri Lanka a lot. Is, I think a lot of the times is anywhere, it's just that how communication happens a lot of the time, like parents don't want to get into introducing something like an augmented communication system. So an augmented communication system is kind of like giving the kid a different way of communicating. So if the kid is not communicating vocally, like vocalizing things, they can still communicate using cards, right? So that it's called PEX. It's called the picture exchange system. So then, so there, like, you are teaching the kid to ask. So why is it, the reason why it's really important to teach the kid to communicate is you're giving your kid a voice, right? By parents not being willing to introduce a picture exchange system or any augmented communication system, it really takes away from the kid's ability to communicate, or taking away the ability for a kid to have a voice, have autonomy, which is really sad. And I think it's not even, the onus isn't just on the parents. I think we as special needs educators should better advocate for our client and explain things better to parents so that they understand how important it is. Because it is, as a parent, it is hard to understand that my kid might not communicate the way I want to, but at least my kid is communicating and my kid has a voice. So now I've talked for a while. So I'm gonna have questions for you guys. So situation one, there's a toddler. So the two toddlers, Supun and Amal, they're in kindergarten. Amal has this red toy car, and Supun comes to Amal, hits Amal. Amal puts the car on the floor and then runs to the teacher crying. Supun picks up the red car, so happily waddles away, and just happy because he has the car, right? And then day two, same thing happens. Amal has a toy that Supun kind of wants, and Supun's like eyeing, and then Supun hits Amal, And then again, same thing. Suppose just a happy kid. It's like, oh, I get to play with this new toy and like going. So can someone tell me what is Supun's hidden behavior trying to tell you? Is Supun trying to be like a very difficult kid? Is he like being mean? Is he just a naughty boy? These are very common things you hear. But so can you tell me what is Supun's behavior telling you? Great. Yes, he is trying to get a toy. He is trying to get what he wants, right? Yeah, exactly. So he is trying to gain access to someone. Great. Um, yes, exactly. I love that. Yes, Samadhi. He does not know any other way to communicate. So he knows that is the exact way to kind of communicate. Instead of asking for the toy, I will hit, and it works every time. Amal drops the toy. So someone's like, oh, great. And then, and let's think of another one. So we've talked a lot about kids, right? So now let's talk about politicians doing interviews. If you have watched most political debates, when an interviewee asks a difficult question, how does the politician respond? They just go on a screaming match. But if you listen to what they say, are they answering the question? It doesn't look like they're answering the question. They're just attacking the interviewee, the person who is in the interviewer. They're just attacking the interviewer, saying that they have wrong facts, never addressing. So, for example, if the interviewer is like, "Oh, corruption happens," a politician's in for re-election, and they're like, "Corruption happened during your time," yada yada yada, and then the politician's like, "How do you know this?" And then starts screaming at the interviewer, right? Do you think is the purpose of the politician's behavior when they're screaming? Exactly. I love that they are trying to avoid the question. Very good. I'm really glad that this lets me know that I've done a decent job at explaining the purpose of behavior. Yes. So what they are trying to do is they're trying to avoid the question because they don't have anything of substance to answer. So they're just going to like just scream at the interviewee and be until the interviewee just is like, okay, no, like I'm not gonna ask the question again. Kind of like a baby. Sometimes, most of the time, when babies cry and we're like trying to get them somewhere, we're like, oh, let's go to the table, or let's go to sleep. They're like crying, 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 and then you're like, oh, okay, stay in your playpen. You're happy there. Yes, stay there, right? So it's like great. So that's kind of what they're doing. So let's think of something that the interviewee can do. So one thing the interviewer can do, the interviewer can do is like, okay, scream. That's something we do with our kids is like, okay, scream and then like represent the demand, kind of like represent the question, right? So that not letting the politician like get away with not answering, kind of like representing it. But that also takes a lot of patience on the interviewer's side. So it's like, it's going to be like, oh, like he screams, okay, great. Looks like you're done. But so how are you exactly going to address corruption in your re-election, right? And it can happen a few times. And that's when that is like a good way for even the politician to know like, oh, I cannot escape not answering this question. I would have to, right? So instead of, so not, so yeah, so letting them know that, you know, like you have to answer the question. So I put that in because I've talked a lot about kids. I wanted people to like start seeing behavior in like other aspects. And I'm gonna move on to, thank you so much for responding. So now I'm gonna go into like grad school, right? So when choosing a school, so for me, I chose the school. I was familiar with the school. I was kind of familiar with the program. I kind of knew about the program. So when I was like looking, that was one of the first programs that I looked into, and that was the first program I heard back from. So I was like, yes, I accepted it, and I went ahead with it. When I picked locations, for me, I know some people say locations are important. Some people say location is important when you're picking grad school because you're like going to be there for a few years. It depends from person to person, but for me, I am a creature of habit, so I really liked being able to go to somewhere that I knew already and I was comfortable with. So I went back to Arizona State University. Funding, sadly, in like a master's program, usually funding is very limited, at least in the US. I'm not sure about other countries. But one way to get funding is by TAing. However, there are some limitations to that too. I'll get to that in the next slide. And another thing is like, are you doing the program to kind of asking yourself, are you doing the program to get a board certification? Because if you are going to get into a program to do a board certification, then you have to pick schools that are under the BACB purview. So then the BACB recently changed their guidelines. So it's earlier, it's like anywhere you do the ABA program, you still could get board certified, as long as you're getting supervision from someone who was board certified. And then if the country that you're in does not offer the exam, you can go to another country that offers it and do the exam, and great. But now you have to get your board certification from only like a few countries, and you have to work in that country, right? So it's only a few countries now. So it's the US, the UK. I think the UK is changing soon to Australia and Canada. So it's just a few countries. But one of the upsides of having a board certification, because the certification is very rigorous as opposed to other like bodies that offer certification, people still like place it highly. So for example, like we had a speaker that came to school and was talking about like ABA in Saudi and kind of the Middle East. And one thing she was saying is even though you cannot get board certified by working in Saudi or the Middle East would still hold someone who has the board certification a lot higher, and like your job prospects are better if you have it. So that is like, even if you look at like people at like when you look at like at the job market kind of, you would still see them asking like, oh, it's advantageous to have this, like if you have this, great. So that is like one advantage of having it. And this is a ABA International, kind of a professional like body of like people in the field of ABA all over the world. So they have conferences, they do research, they also kind of are part of like an accreditation body for programs. So they have a list of countries that offer the BCBA program. So a BCBA program is Board Certified Behavior Analyst, and that is always a master's program. So this is just to give you an idea of like what countries kind of offer that. And so the link is there. I will also share the link at the end. And the ABAI, like that website is also a great place for you to like find other avenues of ABA. And also they have chapters like across the world. So they have a chapter in Japan, they have a chapter in Australia, they have a chapter in Saudi that's like relatively new, a few years ago. And so you could also connect with people there. Like if there is a country that you want to work in, you can like join one of those chapters and then kind of join them and like make connections and kind of understand like what is ABA in their field, in their country. And they also have SIGs, so they're special interest groups, different things. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid, so that's also a good place to join. Like the unpaid one, they just have discussions. Sometimes it's just a Facebook group, like people are just posting stuff, asking questions. So that would be a really good resource if you want to like get into the field of ABA. Things to consider about grad school is like, so if you are this is important, if you are taking kind of the board certification route, then you have to have a certain number of supervision hours, and you could either take the 2,000 hours supervision route or the 1,500. So if it's 2,000, then you have to have 5% of those hours supervised. And if it's 1,005, you have to have 10% of it supervised. And so those are things to think about too. And I had a friend of mine, she did not plan on staying in the field of like ABA, not in the field of ABA, she didn't plan on staying in the field of autism. And a lot of the times, if you are in the field of autism, is when you have to have a board certification because of licensing and insurancing purposes. But if you kind of venture out in other directions, you don't necessarily have it because those are because sorry, I saw a question. Because those fields are up and coming and they don't really have like a regulatory board for that. So question about supervision. So how supervision works is you would, so how it works in the company, in my program is our program had like certain like practicum sites, so different companies that offer ABA services. It's primarily to autism. That's why it is big too. It's because I don't think there's any site that provided ABA services to any population other than the autism population or special needs population. It is simply because that is where money is at, and in the sense like that is where like insurance is paying, that is where like people can get paid. So yeah. So how supervision works is so for a month you have to have, if you're doing the 2,000 hours, you have to have 4 contacts. So 4 contacts could be either you meet one-on-one with your supervisor, you have like group supervision where the entire team that works on a few clients come together, you kind of see what's working, what's not working, are there any new interventions added, and kind of have the ABA discussions on like what's going on. And then and another way to get a contact is your supervisor is observing you implement this interventions. So the programs the supervisor is written, the supervisor observing if you're implementing them, if you're implementing it to fidelity, if you are fidelity meaning just if you are implementing it correctly. And if you are not, then you kind of have that and you get more training on it. And another way to get supervision is to kind of help supervisors when they're doing assessments. So that's the same with the concentrated, except in concentrated, you have to have 6 contacts per month. So it's a little more intense. So barriers for international students, at least these are some of the barriers that I faced, right? So travel. The state that I picked to work in has really bad public transport. And some of these companies, they are in clinic, but they also work in home, in school, which means I would have to travel from the clinic to the school and maybe sometimes to another kiddo's home. So that's a lot of traveling. And so one thing they don't want to do, so you'd think, yeah, you can use Uber, but Uber is expensive, but also there is like a violation of privacy because you're giving your client's address to like a third party company. So that's like a no. So they don't want to do that. So it took me a while to find a company that does, a lot of the companies do in clinic and also in home and all of that. So they want someone who can work, who has the ability to kind of work in all of those areas. So I had to like talk to companies and be like, can I just work in clinic? Because then I can use public transport because I go into work and then I leave at 4 or 5. So that was something to think about, because if you are thinking of getting a car, that's another expense. Then you also have to figure out like getting a driver's license and all of that. So that's something to think about. And then working part-time and full-time. So as international students, the amount of time that you can work is rather limited when you are studying full-time, right? So like the regulations of the governmental like visa regulations, like when you are a full-time student, you can only work part-time. So here is what happens with the funding thing is like you can't, if you do take a TA position is usually requires about 10 hours per week. So that means you only have 10 hours left to get your practicum hours. So that's a little bit of a trade-off there. And sometimes companies, yes, a TA is a teaching assistant. Sorry about that. So a TA is a teaching assistant position. So you're being a teaching assistant to a professor. And then, yeah, so that is kind of a trade-off that happens there. And sometimes companies don't even want you to work for like 10 hours. They're like, no, we want you for a minimum of 20 hours at least. So that is something to kind of think about when you are looking at getting your hours in. One thing I liked about our program was some programs don't do it. So our program signed contracts with all of the practicum sites saying that they had to pay us for, because we're still working for the company's still billing the client, billing the parents and the insurance company, so the company is getting paid. So they had signed programs, like set kind of contracts with all the practicum sites saying that they have to pay us. Whereas some programs, I didn't know that, but some programs don't do that. So you would essentially be working for free. So that is also something to think about and kind of consider when you are applying. And I think another thing is like the requirements kind of vary from program to program. Like our program, we had people who were whose background was psychology, special needs, some people who were like really changing careers and stuff. So I think it also looks into you. I think you would have to specifically look into like what the school is asking for you in your application. So far, does anybody have any questions?
Or comment. You can share.
Or a comment or something you found interesting.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. I don't know if this is kind of dumb, but I am considering the path of being
There are no dumb questions.
Thank you. But I am considering the path of doing so, and I did my bachelor's in psychology, and I'm just wondering, like, if I were to apply for master's, I'm really confused because I'm a recent graduate and I don't know where to apply, or like you said, like with the site, that's going to be very helpful. But like if I were to apply for scholarships and things like that, could you tell me where I'd go?
Okay, so are you Samadhi?
Yes, I am.
Okay, cool. So Samadhi, I am, so that's the thing, like TA positions are always like, it's a hit and a miss. I know, like so what happens is you join the program and then you kind of then your like department would constantly like be like, hey, we're looking for a TA position, we're looking for a TA position. Another thing that you could do is before you apply, kind of ask your professors if there are like options for TAing and kind of that. So one thing I did was when I was applying, I would just, because someone said no, don't hesitate to ask another person. Because when I was applying, I wanted to know like what it was for an international student. And I didn't ask the department kind of chair, like the person who's running the program. I asked kind of the manager of that program. And she's like, no, we cannot divulge any information, right? But if I asked my chair, he's the most nicest guy ever. Like he would have spoken to another international student and been like, here, like talk to them, connect with them, get it, right? So I would suggest kind of like reaching out to either the school or directly kind of the chairs and be like, are there like TA positions and that kind of thing, right? And another thing is like there are some schools that also have like RA stuff that happen in the realm of ABA. So then that could also count to your supervision. So that is also something to think about. Did I answer? And this is very specific to the US. I'm not sure how like funding works. I know like there are like other kind of funding for masters and stuff in, I think the UK has like a lot of funding different like types of funding for masters. Maybe I could look it up and kind of send that to you. But in the US, like especially for masters, funding is really low. But if you're looking into getting into a PhD program, yes, they're fully funded. You get stipends and all of that stuff.
Yes, that
Yeah.
answers the question. Thank you so much.
Okay, no worries. Okay, so anybody else? Okay, so then I'm kind of gonna give you like a brief over, because I think we're like cutting close to time. So I'm gonna like, because we have like 5 more minutes. So I'm just gonna go into like a very brief overview of kind of like what my classes were like. I'll just like highlight some of them. So for example, the observational, like the behavioral observation and functional assessment class, right? So there we kind of learned how to run assessment. So there you learn how to like what we talked about before, like, oh, understanding what the purpose was, but in a more systematic pattern, we learn how to find out what those like functional relationships are, how the environment and the behavior are affecting, interacting with each other, and like how the behavior is changing, right? And then there's a lot of like report writing that you get to learn to do. And also like one of the things I liked about this class was we learned to also like how to present the reports that you write, not just to like your colleagues, but also to parents. Because when you write assessments like this, like one of the things that you write is you always have like the skill deficits, but you don't, because you are always trying to improve the skill deficits, right? So that's why you're like honing on the skill deficits. But you forget that a parent is also listening to this. So you also have to be like, okay, skills deficit, because that's going to tell the parent, like, my kid knows nothing, right? So when you are talking, it is also important to be like, yes, these are the skill deficits, but these are like the things that this kid has that we can work on and improve. And these are the things that the kid has that could like be pushed to improve more skills. And another class that I really enjoyed was the OBM class. The OBM is Organizational Behavior Management. So that looks outside of just autism. But with this class, like what we did was all of us took like a project that one, like an issue that our companies were going through. We worked on it either hypothetically or like we actually worked on it, or we had like hypothetical solutions. So to the entire semester, we worked as like a consultant to the company. So that was a lot. So things that people worked on this was I worked on like people signing up for subbing sessions, like how to get people to sign up for subbing sessions more. Most of the people worked, our field has a very high burnout rate. So most of them worked on like burnout. Some of them worked on like making sure your RBTs, that's registered behavior technicians, are always implementing sessions and or correctly. And another thing was like they're always writing session notes right after the session. They're not writing session notes the next day morning or like 2 days later. We know how our memory works. We forget things. So session notes are going to be very inaccurate if you do that way. And another like class that I really liked was the special topics class, because our program is small, so we didn't have the option of like picking special topics classes. So this was like one that was chosen for us. It was a supervision class. So with that supervision class, you learn how to be a supervisor, you learn how to give feedback, you learn how to take feedback, you learn about the different, like you learn the research on feedback. And this is important because this not only applies to like you being in the field of ABA, but if you want to take your skills to another, like you want to maybe you worked in HR and you came to do this ABA like masters, and then you can take all of that back into your company like that you worked for as an HR manager and use it and be like, how do I give feedback to my staff? How do I know like what kind of feedback my staff wants? How do I supervise my staff? How do I make my staff feel comfortable enough to ask questions from me? How do I make sure my staff's not burnt out? So those are things that are very, very beneficial. And the next one is applied project. So that's like kind of the research or kind of the last thing you do. So we had 3 options: do a creative project, lit review, or run a study. So what I was interested in, I always want to look, I know I'm going to be working in the space of autism, but I know that I want to like use my brain to like think in other ways too. So what I wanted to do was acceptance and commitment therapy is kind of up and coming within the field of ABA. So what I wanted to do was like, how would acceptance and commitment therapy intervention affect procrastination related to writing in graduate student? Yes, I was doing it for myself. As a graduate student, I procrastinated on writing because grad school is a lot of writing, so I was doing it for myself. But so that is kind of what I was the space that I was interested in. And I'm really sorry, we are on time. We've reached our hour. I'm really sorry. Rishma, can I keep going, or
Yeah, you
do
can
you want me?
go, and maybe those of you who feel like I really so I'm just gonna ask you upfront right now. Can I share this recording?
Yeah, you can share the recording.
Great. So maybe some of you have sent messages that you came in late, you want the recording. So there's going to be a recording. We're going to have Vayangana just continue on till the end because there's not much actually, just a teeny tiny bit more. Go ahead, Vayangana.
Okay, cool. So now we're gonna think about, okay, I got my there's one question. Oh, okay, sorry. That was some of these questions. Okay, so what's after grad school, right? So after grad school, you can do 2 things, like 2 pathways. You can go for more school, get into a PhD program, or you can venture out into kind of the field of ABA, like working directly with people. So here there are a lot of like subspecialties in ABA, but the one that is as a newly minted BCBA or like a behavior analyst would be autism, because again, that is because there's so many clinics for autism. That is also because that is where the money is at. Like money is at, as in that's where like insurance pays. And so for things like aging care and all of that, sometimes like insurance is like very iffy on paying, so then companies don't want to do it because we're not sure, right? So in the end of the day, a company still wants to make money. So that is why like autism is so, it did take a while for even to get insurance to pay for autism, but once we kind of started to get that, like now all of the insurance companies are on board, and there's a lot of like legal stuff and ethical stuff that's been like insurance cannot discriminate and all of that. I also like love the ethics part of ABA too. Didn't get much into it, but that is also something like I'm really passionate about. And so then there's behavioral pediatrics. So behavioral pediatrics, you're solely like looking at this is really great. There's this really great speaker called Dr. Pat Fryman. So this website is also like linked in the resources. I will put it in the chat, and I'll probably also put it in the WhatsApp group so you have the resources. Dr. Pat Fryman explains, like has a talk on this, and he explains it so beautifully because he explains ABA terminology without using the words, but he explains it. He's such a eloquent speaker. Like before I speak to people, like I try to like listen to him and kind of emulate that, because he is really good, because he's someone who always said like ABA always has a marketing problem, in the sense that the field has always been very cocky, and that is why we have an issue with assent and consent, is because with ABA behavior analysts are like, yeah, we know it works, so we're going to use it. Like, it doesn't matter if you want that treatment, or like you don't like it, we're still going to implement it because we know it works, because we have the data. Yes, you have the data, but you also have to think about the person, if they do want that intervention or not, or if they are comfortable with or not. So now like we're trying to be a little more humble, a little more like less cocky, and be like, okay, let's come to the table and we're all going to see. And that is why socially, like your interventions have to be socially significant. So there's also like in sports management, in malnourishment, in environment, right? So even if you're like, so for environment, like think about things like, how do you get people to change their behavior into like doing things like recycling, or even things like, you know, for like people to turn off the light when they like leave a room, or turn off the AC. Like what kind of ABA principles can I use? So in ABA, we have some principles like prompting and different levels of prompting. So what you can do is to turn off the light, you can just be like, have like a little bit of a prompt there, like turn like a visual prompt, something like I've seen places that have like a little meme that is like, so it's like a visual prompt for them people to like turn off the lights. So there are little things like you wouldn't think that they're like things of ABA, and sometimes I don't think people use it thinking that these are like principles of ABA, but they do use it. So that is how you could kind of think about it. So even like in public health, right? We had a massive crisis like with COVID, right? You needed people to wear masks. You needed people to sanitize. You needed people to like not socially gather in large crowds and all of that. So there's also places where you can use ABA. And also in like health and fitness. So some of the things that I've seen in health and fitness is like, when you are for fitness or like sports, like how to train people, what is the most effective way to train, things like that. So you can use principles of ABA to do that too. Another interesting part that I have it in the resources too is like there is Dr. Friedman. She works with a lot of zoos to kind of not train animals, and also to get animals to like to make sure, like sometimes like animals when they have like health stuff, and like, you know, when they have to get the injections and stuff, how to kind of do that. And one thing I love about her work is even if it's an animal, so an animal cannot give consent, but she always takes a scent from the animal. So I would highly suggest like checking out her website. I've linked it. It is honestly like, it is beautiful to see how kind people are even to animals. And so these are my resources. So even if you don't plan on getting your board certification, the BACB website is a great resource to kind of look at like what is out there. So that table that I showed, it is from the BACB website. So you can kind of understand like the different kinds of fields. So this table, all of these, there is a speaker, an expert in that field, kind of talking about what ABA and that field is doing, right? So it is if one of these piqued your interest, then you can kind of look into that. And the other one is the ABAI website. I kind of talked a little bit about that too. Behavioral observation. So this is a podcast. I love it. It's run by Matt Sequoia. He himself is a behavior analyst. So he brings in various people in the field of ABA who are doing different things. Like even if they are like within the space of autism, they sometimes have like very specific niche things. So sometimes they're within the space of autism, and they're also specifically just looking at feeding, or specifically just looking at sleeping, or like specifically just toileting, or like, and some of them are looking at like supervision, and some of them are like very like experts in their field for like what to do for burnout and how to like handle that and all of that. So that is a great podcast. And it has a few, he has a few talks from Dr. Pat Fryman. Yes, I love Dr. Pat Fryman. The way he talks, the way he explains things, it is just so digestible. So for someone who's initially listening to him and who did not have like a very, I was not very knowledgeable in ABA, he was really helpful. And to this day, like sometimes when he explains things, like I write it down, like, oh, this is like a great way to talk about this colloquially. So that is why I really like his talks. And the other one is Foxy Learning. So Foxy Learning, it is catered towards like ABA professionals to kind of get their continuing education like CEUs, but they also have like free resources in it. This is a link to that. So there they have like either modules or like discussions, webinars in there. Like the modules, they have question and answers. Those modules are great. So if you're new into ABA and you kind of want to get a feel into what is it, that is a great place to start. And fun fact, there's one module on ABA, there's one on like autism and sexuality, and that the doctor who does that, she is Sri Lankan. And because like there's a big talk in Sri Lanka about sex education, all of that, that is like, if you are interested in that, that would be a great resource for that too. Because I don't think when we talk about sex education, we sometimes forget the special needs population when we do that. So that's also a great place. Behavior Works is the website I told you about, Dr. Friedman. She's the one who works in zoos. So you have, so that's the one if you are interested in animals and how ABA works in that space, that is something that you could check out. Behavioral Rethink, it is a company that provides like billing services and all of that, but they have this like free resource, like they have like webinars and blogs that you can watch. So they have things like parenting, how to take data and all of that. One other thing that I'm interested in is like looking into how to use ABA to parent, because like one thing I'm currently working on in Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka, parents are so used to like punitive punishment, like hitting, a lot of hitting with whatever instrument that they would like to. So we always tell parents like, don't hit. But the problem with that is we're not giving parents an alternative. Like we make parents feel bad for hitting, but that parents are hitting. If you think about this, parents hit because when they hit the kid, the behavior that they wanted to stop stops, right? So parents are reinforced, like they're reinforced by the hitting. They have learned that the hitting works, right? So that is why they keep repeating it. Most of the time, parents don't hit because they're just mean, sadistic people. They just want the kid to be better, right? But they're hitting because they don't know better. So when we say things like, don't hit your kid, great, yes, don't hit your kid. But we need to be able to give parents other things to be able to do. So that's something that I'm working on the side with like, that's something that's like one of my passion projects that I'm working with one of my professors to kind of build a parenting guide using principles of ABA, and kind of writing it, catering it more to a Sri Lankan context, not to an American context, but it's parenting not to the autism population, but to like the neurotypical developing kids. And okay, this is your chance to ask questions. It is okay, honestly, you don't have to forever hold your peace. You can definitely email me or anything, but I would love to hear from you guys. If you have any questions, any thoughts, one thing that you found really interesting, or like just tell me about you, like what is your background into, like I would love to know that too. So anybody, I see a chat.
Can unmute and speak. And thank you, Vayangana, for taking the time.
No worries. I'm sorry I went over time.
So we started late, and
okay.
Clearly people stayed on. So
okay.
okay.
Does anybody have any questions?
Or
No?
comments or
Or
statements.
comments? Any thoughts? Anything you found interesting? Or like if you feel like oh, I went through this and I don't think ABA is for me, I would love to know that too.
Oh,
Because I was that person. I
have
very outright said. Okay, we have a question. I'm wrapping up my additional training in an advanced study. So this was okay. Thank you. I want to know about more resources. So as of now, I only know like 2 individuals who provide ABA services. One of them is Dr. James, and then one of them is Miss Nishadi. No, Ishani Pereira. I think she's at the ABC school. Those are the only 2 people that I know. Out of them, I know Dr. James has his board certification. I don't think that Miss Ishani does. But the thing is, when you're in Sri Lanka, you don't have to have a board cert. Like you can work because we don't have a regulatory body, which is like another hill that I would like. That's something that I would die on. I really want these like special needs services to be regulated in Sri Lanka because there's a lot of shady things that happen. And personally, like even like there are things that I did in my as a special needs educator. I'm like, never again. So for example, this is like me being really vulnerable here, but there was a time when I had this like older kid who sometimes just did not want to come into session, right? And he was really scared of my boss. And I'd be like, she's coming, let's go. And I don't think fear is the best way to do it. It worked, but it definitely isn't. I would not suggest teaching. I still, to this day, I'm saying it with a smile, but I, to this day, feel really bad about it. Because when I started working in the company that I worked for, I'm like, dang it, I really shouldn't have done that. There are other things that I could do. So, for example, I could have done choice. Like, I could have been like, okay, do you want to go now or do you want to go in 10 minutes? Or do you want to go with me or do you want to go with mom? So that gives the kid autonomy to make a choice. Like I'm giving a little bit of like, okay, I'm telling you to go in, but you also get skin in the game by like making the choice of how you want to go or when you want to go, right? Yeah, I mean, if you want to know more about like things I would do differently, I would like to share them too. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I would do differently.
You know, on the note of like in Sri Lanka, for those of you who are curious, even Dr. James, he's also a friend of mine as well. And so in conversation with him, I do understand what he's working towards very with so much gumption, with so much compassion, so much conviction is to set up a board within Sri Lanka of ABA professionals. They may not have a master's like Vayangana, but you do have different levels of certificate that you can do. And he's looking to create a community. So it would be valuable. I'll try to talk to him and see. He's really busy right now. He recently, a what do you call it? Like a felicitation for him being granted one of the highest honors of the BPS, the British Psychology Society, as a fellowship.
Yeah.
Which was just showing his contribution to the field, not just in Lanka, but just his contribution to the field on the whole. So that's something that we can look into. Maybe I'll try to set up a conversation as well with him, and maybe he can point all of you who are interested in the direction of how to participate. Because how to participate in getting involved in ABA, not necessarily just for autism. I mean, he sent me a video. He's like, Krishna, look, I use ABA to teach the cat to poop.
Yes, he sent me that too. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, look, this is what I do. So it actually goes in. He said, I'm still trying to train it to flush after it potties. He's still like in that process, but he's He's got the cat to know that, okay, I have an urge to defecate. Go to the washroom. This is where you do it. Climb onto the commode and, very elegantly drop your givings to the throne. And then it's just still need to learn how to flush. That's all. So let me see if I can do that for you guys, those of you who are curious. I'm going to drop the link to our WhatsApp group where we're doing all these talks on. If you want to join, you join. If you don't want to, you don't. It's just because then it's easy to disseminate information for us. So that if, Dr. James does go like, yeah, sure, let's do this. Let's have more people. Let's see how we can help them in his time. Then I can just send those details to anyone who are interested and just come on. Yep.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I think I saw somebody unmute. Did somebody unmute and want to ask Vayangana a question?
It doesn't have to be a question. You can just talk about your experience in Sri Lanka, whatever it is. Or if you want to know more about like what working here looked like, and all of that, like how it was different from Sri Lanka, I would love to talk about that too. Anything, just ask. Like, there are no dumb questions. I'm telling you, there are no dumb questions. Because if you are thinking of a question, I bet like so many other people are thinking of the same question. The amount of times that I've not asked a question and another person asked that question, countless. So please ask your question.
Well, no questions. Well, then there's the form for us.
Okay, then I have a questionnaire for you guys. I think it should be in the chat too. Yeah, so this is basically, so I talked about how our field is heavy on feedback. So this is feedback for me to know what I can do better for the next time. What worked for you guys, what didn't work for you guys. It's just 3 simple questions about what worked and what didn't work for you guys and like what I could do better. Yeah, I would really appreciate it if you guys could respond to that. It's completely anonymous too, so yeah.
Did you drop the link in the chat?
I dropped the link before. I'm gonna exit from I'm gonna stop screen sharing so I can go back to the link.
Oh yeah, because I think you did, but I can't locate.
Okay, it's at the top, that's why. But yeah, I can share it. I have it now.
Oh, you know what? I left the chat and I came back. That's why I don't have it.
Oh, okay. Can everyone access the link?
I don't have it.
I'm pretty sure everyone should have access to the link. Yeah, it should work. Yeah.
Okay, so could you copy it and just resend it in the chat?
Oh, I'm sorry. I've directly messaged it to someone. I'm sorry.
Whoever you are, you're special.
Okay. Yeah, now it is there to everyone. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, I got access.
So while we are waiting and while you guys are kind of putting in your answers in there, I would really like to know like what you guys are doing in Sri Lanka and like what kind of fields you are in, if you are willing to and open to share. Oh, I think there's a question. Oh, and you can just call me Vayangana. Okay, so becoming a clinical psychologist, I am not sure about New Zealand, but becoming a clinical psychologist in the US requires a PhD and it is very competitive. So for me, like the reason why I did the research that I did in the beginning was because I was interested in a clinical psychology route. I'm not a competitive person and the clinical psychology programs are so competitive. And I was like, nope, that is not what I want to be in. So that is why I didn't pick that route. I'm not sure about New Zealand, but I know in the US it is this is not to discourage you. This is just a me thing, that because I am just not like just wired that way. For context wise, like sometimes some programs, like the professor that I was working in her lab would get over 400 applicants for clinical psychology PhD programs, and she would only accept one. That is also because of funding for clinical psychology programs. So that is like an issue. But in the US, clinical psychology, but I know in Sri Lanka, like they have the MPhil, where you can do your clinical psychology program there too. So does having a master's in applied make you eligible for? That depends on the clinical psychology program that you're applying to. So if there is a specific like clinical psychology PhD program that you're looking into, then I would highly suggest like reaching out to that program and asking if like you can continue it to continue it into a PhD where you would have reduced course load. I know my program did not. So if I were to get into a PhD, I would have to do the 4 years. Does that, I hope that, I know that answer wasn't very specific to New Zealand, but I hope that answered your question a little bit.
So somebody wants to do a clinical psychology program in New Zealand, is that correct?
Yes, they want to do a clinical psychology program in New Zealand, and the question was, does having a master's in applied psychology kind of make you eligible for that? And another thing, I don't know about New Zealand, but in the US, you don't have to have a master's to get into a PhD program. You can straight away go from your undergrad to a PhD program, because while you're doing your PhD program, you get your like master's while you're doing it, and then you kind of go into becoming a PhD candidate as you progress.
It depends on so actually with New Zealand and Australia, I mean, Australia, the education system is very, very different. But with New Zealand, depends on your PhD.
Okay.
If they are actually requiring you to have a master's with clinical experience, depends on how you use your master's in your ABA to gather that experience, would put you in a better position to be an accepted candidate for this PhD in clinical psychology. It's very tricky, you know, these decisions that they make in academic institutions. So you want to actually do your research. What I would point you in the direction is go onto forums of the university that you're trying to apply to and see what people say. And at the same time, do not feel shy to get on to that faculty of the university and email the lecturers or whoever is there on the faculty, you know, I'm curious about this. How does this work? Because sometimes when you go through admissions doesn't sometimes always have all the information. And when that's one of the reasons why they have the emails of the faculty on the website. Is public domain information. So don't feel afraid to send the mail direct and say, hey, you know what? This is what I have. What do I need to do? What can I do to ensure that I increase my opportunities for entering this program? So that's something for you to look at and see. There's so many ways to, unfortunately, I'm going to say this. But by the way, I love animals. To skin a cat. Okay, maybe I'll say peel an apple. Might be a better way to say it. Okay, yeah, so there's so many ways to do that. Not the traditional route always works. We're in 2024, remember that. Of course, yes, some institutions do still have old school way of thinking, which is fine, which is why still use the email the people, find out. But ABA, so Vayangana, thank you so much for that, because I think you see from her presentation, when you say ABA, you do not have to limit yourself to getting stuck and glued onto special needs, and particularly the label of autism. You can use it in a variety of settings. So when you're looking at clinical psychology programs, it's a Boulder model. So Boulder model means they put equal attention for your clinical work plus your research. which is why it makes it very competitive and very intense. So if you have the clinical experience that this program is looking at, you might go and see on forums that, oh, a lot of their work surrounds old age population, okay? Or maybe a lot of their work involves rehab. So what can you do? This is your way of knowing that, maybe I'll just do some of my clinical work in a rehab place. So then that's that on your CV, you send it to them. So these are ways in which you can try to increase your chances. I hope that helps.
Kind of to add into what Rushma said, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to reach out. And if you don't hear from them like in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, don't feel bad to like follow up. Because they get so many emails, and you're like, my professor, like I would have, he's always said like, if I don't respond to you in 3 days, please nudge me, right? So he's like, don't feel bad about it, just like, hey, you did not respond to this, right? So don't, I mean, when you are talking to someone new, like don't say that, but like if you have built rapport, you can say that. But like, hey, like I understand you're busy, I would love to know if you have some time to respond to kind of these questions, right? And if it is, I don't know how like frowned upon, I mean, don't use this for like your schoolwork or your assignments and stuff like that. But if you are kind of in a rut and you're like, I don't understand how to write this email, doesn't make sense, put everything you want into ChatGPT. It'll give you a template and then build it from there, right? Because sometimes it's just, even in academic writing, it's just the starting to write that's just overwhelming, right? It's the start, right? So then just put it in there and then it'll flow. Or like if you are still not like comfortable, you can share it with someone like a professor of yours, a lecturer of yours, and be like, hey, I want to like reach out to this person. Can you please kind of like check this email and see if it's okay, right? If you are feeling that. And the other thing is, don't read too much into how they respond, because different people respond differently. I'm saying this with like personal experience. My department chair is the absolute nicest person you will ever meet. But if you read his email, you'd be like, oh my God, did I piss him off? Like, is he mad at me? Because it's just one word, yes. Something like that. He even in his emails, he's like, just put bullet points. Just don't write essays. Just because I don't have time to do it, to read all of that, right? So he would respond like, where is this? Or like, oh yeah, here's the resource to it. Sometimes he'd be like, okay, hey, name, this is the response. This is what you are. So here are the resources. Bye, right? The end. So that is also okay. Just don't read too much into it. Like if you're getting the information that you want, and if they are willing to take the time to respond to you, that means they care enough to take the time to respond to you. Read into that. Don't read into kind of how it, because I'm an overthinker. I read that email in like different ways and like, is this how it was intended for me to read? But no, don't do that.
Function of the behavior.
Yes.
That's what you today.
Yes, look at the observable and measurable things. Don't try to mind read.
There you go. And you'll have healthy, happy ABA specialists to come. Right. So we've come to the end. Thank you so much, Vayangana, and thank you everybody on this call for showing up and wanting to learn and asking your questions and giving your shares. Really, really appreciate it. We will have the recording available for you all. Give us some time, and maybe in a week or a few days, or maybe a little longer. But you'll definitely have it. Okay? So have a good one. Good night. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you everyone for showing up, asking questions, and unmuting yourself and also asking questions. I know it is a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thanks, Abiha. Thank you, Nafla. Thank you, Vanya. Anusha, Monadi, Samadhi, Zaina.